What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to be looking at how to create a contact form submission using Airtable and Next.js. A contact form is super important so that people can reach out for maybe content creation, collaboration, job offers, or if they want to ask you a question. So first I'm going to show you a working version on my site. So if we go here, you can see you can enter in your name and then a message. So hello, and hit reach out. And once that form is submitted, you'll see submission successful. And then if we go to Airtable, which is where all of this is being stored, we can see this submission has been entered. And as you can see, hello. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So if you're ready to learn how to do form submission with Next.js, stick around as we dig into some code. So I started off by creating a Next.js application using the Create Next app. Here we are inside the application. Now I'm going to be using Mantine for this, but you could use any component library you choose, but the tutorial will be done with Mantine. So the first thing we need to do is install all of the Mantine packages we might need. So you can do yarn add @mantine /core @mantine/hooks @mantine/form and @mantine/notifications. So while those are installing, let's just talk about what we're going to be doing. So in this application, we're going to create a form with 3 fields: the name, the email. We're then going to make a submission to Airtable, and it's going to insert a row into the Excel spreadsheet. We're then going to send a notification back saying it's successfully been submitted, or an error message that says it was not. So now we have all of our packages installed, we need to update our app.js to handle Mantine. So go ahead and open your app.js and we can start working on that. So go ahead and delete this import out. We're going to do import notifications provider, and that's going to come from @mantine/notifications. And then we're also going to import the Mantine provider, and that's going to come from @mantine/core. Then we're going to wrap our application here in those 2 things. So we can just cut this out for now. And inside this return, we could do Mantine provider. And then inside that Mantine provider, do notifications provider. And then inside of that, we can return our component. And that's it. That's all we need to have Mantine working. So now we can launch our application and make sure it works as expected. So go ahead and run yarn dev and make sure that your application launches and you can successfully see the page. So as you can see, our Next.js application does load. So now we can start working on the actual form submissions. So inside your index.js, go ahead and remove every single thing except from the return statement and also the imports at the top, and hit save. Now we're going to use that to actually create our application. So we're going to need a few pieces from Mantine core, and we're also going to have something called the use form hook as well as the use notifications. So we can do import text input text area button container group and box, and those are all going to come from Mantine/core. Then we're going to import use form, and that's going to come from @mantine/form. And then we're going to import show notification. That's going to come from @mantine/notifications. Now, before we get started, I want to reiterate that we're not going to be covering what Mantine does here. If you want to see that, there'll be a video in the top right-hand corner. Click it and learn how to use Mantine. So now we have all of that imported, we can start working on our actual application. So we are going to have 3 input fields, and we need to validate at least one of them, which will be the email. And this is where the use form from Mantine comes in. We can actually use this hook. So we do const submit form equals use form. then we're going to tell it in here what we want to do. So we're going to tell it its initial values and anything we want to validate. So you can do initial values, and then inside the initial values, we can set email equal to nothing, name equal to nothing, and finally message equal to nothing. Now those are going to have all of our different forms here. So we're going to use those to submit down, and we're also going to validate the email. So to do that, you just add another comma here and add the validate object. And inside of here, we can tell it which one of these form values we want to validate. So we can say, we want to validate email, and we're going to take the value, and then we're going to use some regex to do that. So it's going to be /s plus the @ symbol /s plus $.test value null if it's good. Otherwise, we'll say invalid email address. Now that gives us the ability to then validate that. And this is just a short bit of regex that tests to make sure that this is actually an email. Although it's not 100% strict, it will do the job. So now we have that, we can then start working on the actual content in here. So we can do container, and we'll set the size equal to 200, and we'll set pixels equal to 0, and we'll make the margin at the top extra large. And then inside of our container, we can have a box, and that box is just going to hold an MX auto. And then inside of here is where our form is going to live. So we can do form, and then for now we'll do on submit equals, we'll do console log values. And then what we can do now is inside of here, we can use these text inputs and also this form submit together to kind of create a way to validate everything that's in there and make sure the values are used as we go along. So we can do text input, and a text input is just a standard text input. We can set it to required. We can give it a label equal to email. And then we can give it a placeholder equal to your email at gmail.com. And then we can send in some props here. So we say ... submit form, which is this form here, get input props, and then email. And that's it. And that will take our input props from up here and we'll be able to use them. So that's our text input for just a regular email. And now we can do one for the name. So we can actually just copy this and drop it down and make sure we change that to required. And then we can change this to name. And we can give it a placeholder. We can say Bruce Wayne. And we'll set this to name. And for the final one, all we're going to do is do the same thing, except for I'm going to use text area instead of text input. So we can just do this, set this to text area, and we'll give this one message. And we say your message, and then finally message. And then that's all of the actual form inputs. And then we just need a button to handle our submission. So we can do a group here, and a group is just flex. We say position is right. We say margin at the top is medium. And then inside of it, button, give it a type equal to submit. And then we'll say submit. And that's it. That's our form essentially completed. So if we go ahead and open that in the web, you'll see some changes have happened. So here is our form. We have email, name, and message. And if we just type in a few letters there and try and submit this, it'll ask us to fill these out. And if we do this and try and submit, we're good to go. So now what do we do now that we've done this? Well, now we actually need to do something when this submission happens here. Right now, I'm just logging out the word values, which is just being values here. But we actually need to log something out and actually use this as an API. So we won't do the handle submit here. First, we'll create our API. So inside of the API folder, create a new file here, and we're going to call it submit.js. And inside this submit is where we're going to handle our submissions. So to begin with, we need to actually set the handler. So we can say export default async function is the handler, and then request and response. And we're going to send down const email, name, and message. Those are the values. And we're going to say equals json.parse request.body. And then we're going to say if there's no email or no name or no message, we can just return an error immediately. So we can just say return res.status 400.json error missing fields. And that will be for that. And then we can say if request.method does not equal post, we'll say return res.status 405.json error method not allowed. And then we'll say if any of these are false, if both of those are false, we can actually make the request now. So we can say const request equals await fetch. And then here is where we're going to make a fetch to the Airtable. So let's just quickly go to Airtable and talk about how that's going to work. So here we are in the Airtable application API. And when you have a base, if you have that, you can actually look in here and it will tell you how to do an API request. Now we want to create a submission record. So this is essentially what we need to do. So this is the API, and then this is the base name right here, and then to the name of the table, so submissions table. And then we're going to insert a record here, and it's going to be these fields, but we only want to do one. So if you click here and say single record object at top level, if you click this, you'll just get a single version, which is exactly what we need. So we know the header needs an API token. We know the content is got to be in a JSON application, and we know we need these fields. So if we go back to our application here and say const await fetch, and then put in this URL, so https api.airtable.com/v0/ and then our base name, which is in that first request, if you look at it, and then do submissions. Then we know we need a post method. So let's do that next. So we can say method post headers. We're going to need two headers. We're going to have one for authorization and one for content type. So content dash type application/JSON. And in this, we're going to have bearer, and then we're going to use an API, but we're going to have it in a .m file. So we'll do that API token. Now, how do you get your API key is actually really great. They've done a really good job of this. So if you go back to here, if you click this show API key here, it'll insert the API key in here. So you just go ahead, click this show API in the top right-hand corner, grab the API key and put it in a .env for us to handle. So I've gone and updated my Airtable token to be the API key that was shown again, show API key, and it will put it right here. So now we only have the last part, which is the actual body of the submission. So to do that, we just do a comma here and say body, and then we're going to create a JSON.stringify, and then we're going to put fields, because that was the first required field, and then the fields that we have, which come from the top up here, email, name, and message. And then once we've done that, we can then check to see if this request is okay. So we can say if request.ok, return res.status 200.json, and we'll just say data okay. Otherwise, we'll just have to return an error. So we can say return res status 400.json error, and then we'll just say error returned. And that's everything for our API. So now we can actually use this to make a submission to our Airtable. So the next part we have to do is update this index to actually do an onSubmit. So we need to change this from onSubmit to actually handle the onSubmit. So to do that, we're just going to create a handle submit underneath here. So we say const handle submit equal to async values. And then inside of here, we can do a const request. So we're going to make an API request to our submit API. So we can do that by doing equals await fetch and then /API/submit. And then we're also going to make a post to that. So we need to do method post. And then the body will be json.stringify values. And then we can close this request up and we can say essentially, if this request is successful, so we can do const result equals await response.json, request.json. We can say if result.data does not equal okay, show notification, which is this show notification from notification. So essentially it's just going to put like a toast on the screen. We can say title, error submitting, and then color, we can set that to red, and then message, we can set that equal to, sorry, there was an error submitting your request. So now we have that part, then we can just do the opposite, right? So if the result is okay, so we can just copy this down, we'll say return, and that'll exit out. Otherwise, we can say success, and we can set this to green, and we can say, I will get back to you ASAP. And then finally, we want to submit and set the values. So we can say submit form dot set values, and that will set these values back to whatever we want. So we can just say email, set that to nothing, name, set that to nothing, and message, set that to nothing, and hit save. So now we have our request. Now we just need to do an onSubmit piece here. We just need to update that to actually handle what we want. So we can do here is submit form. So submit form dot onSubmit, and then we'll pass the values and we'll say values handle submit and then value. We can get rid of this log now. And what's happening here is the submit form, which is this use form, is actually doing the work for us. So we're just going to say onSubmit, pass the values to this handle submit, and then pass the values. So now we're ready to test. Let's go ahead and test it and make sure everything works as expected. Okay, so we move the camera and let's give ahead and test this and say, Spider-Man, hello, Peter, and hit submit. And as you can see down here, we have success submitting. I will get back to you ASAP. and the form has been reset. So there you have it, a way to create a form submission using Airtable's API, Mantine, and of course Next.js. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to drop it a like, comment on more things you want to see in the Jamstack, and I'll see you next time.